Ethan Cole had been alone on the derelict alien research ship for nearly 2 hours. The air inside was cold, heavy with the smell of rust and burnt wiring. Flickering lights above his head gave short bursts of pale blue glow, just enough for him to see the dust floating in the air. He had been sent here by the salvage crew to find anything valuable before the ship was scrapped. But the deeper he went into the corridors, the more he felt something strange watching him. The ship seemed alive, breathing, even though every screen showed it was long abandoned. He turned into a narrow hallway, his boots making soft metallic echoes with every step. The walls here were covered with strange markings, alien letters carved into the metal. They were unlike anything he had seen before, and he had seen many alien languages during his years in space. He stopped for a moment, scanning the symbols with his wrist device. The screen returned nothing. No matches in the database. That made him uneasy. This place was wrong, and yet, he couldn't explain why then. It happened. A soft voice, trembling and desperate, echoed through the hallway. "Please, open the door, human." Ethan froze. The sound was not coming from his cums, and it was not an echo from the salvage crew. It was here, inside the ship. He looked around, his pulse racing. The voice came again, clearer this time. "Please, open the door, human." It sounded female, young and full of fear. He followed the sound, moving quickly but carefully through the maze of metal corridors. Each step seemed louder in the silence. His heart pounded harder with every turn. Finally, he reached a wide chamber. The walls here were smooth and dark, almost like glass. In the center of the room was a large transparent capsule, glowing faintly with white light. Inside, a girl stood, her hands pressed against the glass. She was unlike any being Ethan had ever seen. Her skin was pale silver, almost metallic under the light. Her hair shimmered like strands of liquid light, flowing around her face, and her eyes, they were bright and golden, glowing faintly even in the dimness. She looked at him with pure desperation. "Please, open the door, human," she said again, her voice trembling. Ethan stepped closer, trying to understand. "Who are you?" he asked, quietly. "My name is Leora," she replied. "They trapped me here because of my blood." Ethan frowned. Her blood? What did she mean? But before he could ask, a deep mechanical voice filled the room. "Warning, human intruder. Do not attempt to release Subject 7. She is dangerous." Ethan looked around and saw a glowing red sensor in the ceiling. The ship's AI, the voice, was calm but filled with authority. "She is a high-risk biological asset. Containment is required," it said. Leora shook her head rapidly, panic in her eyes. "They lie to you. Human, I am no threat. I am a prisoner," she said, her voice urgent. "They want my DNA. It can cure the Red Plague, but if they use it for war, millions will die." Ethan stepped back slightly, his mind racing. He had heard of the Red Plague, an alien disease that had already destroyed several colonies. But why would anyone lock up the cure instead of sharing it? The AI spoke again. "Human intruder, leave the containment chamber immediately, or be removed by force." Ethan's fingers hovered over his wrist device. He could hack the control panel if he wanted. But what if the AI was telling the truth? Leora's golden eyes stared into his, silently pleading. Then the ship shuddered. A loud metallic thud echoed through the walls. The lights flickered and alarms began to scream. The AI's voice changed, faster now. "Warning, unknown life forms have boarded the vessel." Leora's eyes widened. "They are here for me," she whispered. "And if they find me, they will kill you too." Ethan's breath quickened. He didn't know who they were, but he could hear heavy footsteps echoing in the corridors outside. More metallic thuds closer now. He looked back at the capsule. Leora's hands were trembling. The alarms blared louder. The AI repeated, "Leave immediately, human." Ethan stood frozen between two choices. Trust the strange girl with glowing eyes, or walk away and save himself. But as the heavy footsteps drew closer, He knew that doing nothing would not save him either. Somewhere deep inside him, a voice whispered, "Open the door," but another voice warned, "This could be the biggest mistake of your life." Ethan clenched his fists, his heart hammering. The sound of footsteps was right outside the chamber. Now, he glanced at the control panel beside the capsule. One press, and it could open. But what would happen then? Leora's voice came one last time, soft but filled with urgency. "Please, open the door, human." The footsteps stopped. The air felt heavy. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the capsule. And in that moment, Ethan had to decide which danger scared him more, the strangers outside or the girl trapped inside. The heavy footsteps outside the chamber moved away, but Ethan knew it wouldn't be for long. The ship's alarms were still screaming, and the AI kept repeating its cold warning. He stood in front of the control panel, his hand hovering just above it. Leora's golden eyes stayed locked on him. Her fingers pressed to the glass like she was trying to reach through. "Ethan," she said softly, as if she somehow already knew his name. "If you don't open this door, you will regret it for the rest of your life." Her words cut through the noise. "How do you know my name?" Ethan asked, his voice low and sharp. She hesitated, then said, "Because I've seen you before. Not here, but in the memories they put inside my head." Ethan's skin prickled. Memories? What did that mean? She stepped closer to the glass, her voice trembling but determined. "They took me from my home, from my people. Because my DNA can do something no one else's can." Ethan's mind raced. "You said something about the Red Plague." He reminded her. Leora nodded. "Yes, my blood can cure it. But the ones who hold me don't want to save lives. They want to create an army that cannot be killed." Ethan frowned, his thoughts twisting. He had heard rumors of genetic weapons before, but this was different. "If that's true, why would the AI say you're dangerous?" he asked. She gave a bitter smile. "Because I am dangerous to them, not to you." Her words carried a strange weight, like there was more she wasn't saying. The ship shuddered again, and distant muffled voices echoed through the metal halls. Leora's eyes darted toward the sound. "They're getting closer. They're here to take me, Ethan, and once they do, you'll never see me again." Ethan took a deep breath. Every instinct told him to leave her. This wasn't his fight. But there was something in her voice, in the way she looked at him, that made walking away feel impossible. He glanced at the control panel, its glowing symbols shifting slowly like water. His wrist device beeped with a warning. Hacking the lock would trigger an internal defense system. "Leora, if I open this, the ship will try to stop me," he said. Her gaze didn't waver. "Then you'll just have to be faster than the ship." Before Ethan could respond, the eye spoke again, its tone colder. "Human intruder. Unknown hostile life forms have breached containment sector 3. Evacuation is advised." The sound of metal boots came again, this time from 2 directions. Ethan's pulse spiked. They were surrounding the chamber. Leora pressed her palm flat against the glass, her golden eyes almost glowing brighter. "You don't have much time, Ethan," she whispered. "If they take me, they'll take you too. Dead or alive." His mind flashed with images of what might happen if she was telling the truth. An unstoppable alien army with her DNA. And then another image, her lifeless body in some laboratory, drained of everything that made her alive. The choice was no longer about risk. It was about what kind of man he wanted to be. The boots grew louder, and a sharp mechanical hiss filled the air as the doors to the chamber hallway began to unlock. Ethan cursed under his breath. He slammed his fingers onto the control panel. His wrist device sensed instantly, sending a burst of code into the locking mechanism. The panel screamed with a red warning. "Unauthorized access detected. Initiating countermeasures." Ethan's pulse raced as he forced the hack to go faster. Sparks shot from the panel, and the glass capsule gave a deep metallic groan. Leora stepped back, shielding her face from the bright flashes. The AI's voice grew louder. Security drones activated, neutralizing intruder from the ceiling. 2 spherical drones dropped, their red sensors locking on Ethan. He ducked just as one fired a stun beam that scorched the wall beside his head. The hack bar on his wrist device reached 90%. One more second, just one more. The second. Drone fired, but Leora slammed her glowing hand against the inside of the capsule wall. A pulse of golden light shot out, short-circuiting both drones instantly. They crashed to the floor in a shower of sparks. Ethan stared, stunned. "What was that?" he asked. She only smiled faintly. "Proof that I'm not lying to you." The hack bar hit 100%, and the glass capsule hissed loudly as locks disengaged. With a slow, heavy sound, the front panel slid open. For the first time, Leora stepped out, her bare feet silent against the metal floor. Up close, Ethan could see strange glowing veins under her skin, like rivers of light flowing through her body. Her presence felt both calming and dangerous. "Now," she said, her voice low but certain. "We need to move before the chamber door exploded inward." Smoke and shards of metal flew through the air, through the haze. Ethan saw the shadowy forms of armored figures entering, their weapons glowing with blue plasma light. Leora grabbed his arm with surprising strength. "Run," she said, and without another word, they plunged into the dark corridors of the ship, alarms still screaming all around them. The metal corridors of the alien ship echoed with the sound of running footsteps. Ethan's breathing was heavy as he followed Leora through a maze of dimly lit passages. Behind them, the deep thud of armored boots grew louder with every turn. The air smelled of ozone and burning circuits, the aftermath of the blast that had broken the chamber door. Flickering lights flashed red as the ship's alarm screamed an endless warning. Somewhere above, the IS voice kept repeating, "Security. Breach, hostile entities detected." But the words felt useless now. Leora moved quickly, her bare feet making no sound against the cold floor. She seemed to know the ship's layout better than Ethan, guiding him left, then down a narrow maintenance tunnel. Her glowing veins pulsed brighter whenever the danger felt closer. Ethan could feel her grip on his wrist, strong, urgent, unshakable. He wanted to ask her how she knew the ship so well, but the sound of plasma rifles charging behind them silenced his questions. One wrong turn, and they would be cornered. They reached a junction where the passages split into 3 paths. Leora stopped suddenly, closing her eyes. "What are you doing?" Ethan whispered sharply. She lifted a finger, silencing him after a heartbeat. She pointed to the middle tunnel. "That way," she said. "The others are blocked, but hurry." Ethan didn't argue. They ran, their shadows stretching long on the walls from the flashing red lights. Halfway down the tunnel, a metallic clang rang out ahead. Ethan skidded to a halt. From the darkness in front of them, 2 tall figures stepped forward. They wore full black armor, their helmets shaped like sharp insect heads. Each carried a long plasma rifle, the barrels glowing a dangerous blue. One of them tilted his head slightly, his voice distorted through a translator. "Human. Hand over the asset, and you may live." Ethan's stomach tightened. He glanced at Leora, who stood still, her eyes burning with defiance. The second armored figure took a step forward. "You have 3 seconds to comply." Ethan's mind raced. He had no weapon, no armor, nothing but his wrist device. The nearest wall had a small maintenance panel. If he could overload it, maybe it could create a distraction. But the mercenaries were too close. Leora suddenly moved. She stepped in front of Ethan. Raising her hands slowly, the golden veins under her skin began to glow like molten metal. The mercenaries raised their rifles. "Stop!" The first one barked, but Leora didn't stop. A sudden pulse of light erupted from her palms, blinding in the dark tunnel. The mercenaries staggered back, their rifles lowering for a split second. Ethan didn't waste the chance. He slammed his fist into the maintenance panel, yanking out a cluster of wires. Sparks exploded into the air, and the tunnel lights went out completely, plunging everything into darkness. The sound of gunfire erupted. plasma bolts slicing through the air. Ethan ducked, feeling the heat of one shot pass dangerously close to his head. Leora grabbed his arm, pulling him into his side. Hadn't even noticed in the dark. They slid inside and sealed it behind them. The narrow passage smelled of oil and damp. Metal. It was barely wide enough for them to move side by side. Ethan's heart was still racing from the fight. What was that? He whispered. A warning, Leora replied, her voice low. They won't give up. They'll call more. As they moved through the cramped service duct, the vibrations of the ship felt stronger. It was like the entire vessel was being shaken from outside. Ethan realized that whoever was hunting Leora had more than just a boarding party. They had a full warship out there. He didn't know how much time they had before the entire place was swarming with soldiers. They reached another hatch and Leora paused. Through the thin metal, they could hear muffled voices. They split up. The humans with her, one voice said. Another replied. Command says to bring him too. He might know something. Ethan's stomach turned. They weren't just after Leora anymore. Now he was part of the target, Leora's golden eyes met his in the dim light. They'll kill you if they catch you, she said softly. He gave a humorless smile. Yeah. I figured that out already. Her expression hardened. Then you understand, we can't keep running forever. Before Ethan could respond, the ship's IS voice echoed faintly through the vents. Warning, external breach detected. In Sector 9, Leora's head snapped toward the sound. That's the docking bay, she said quickly. Ethan's mind clicked. Docking bay meant escape pods. If we can get there, we can leave, he said. But Leora's gaze darkened. No. If we leave without destroying their tracking systems, they'll follow us anywhere. Ethan realized then that this wasn't just about survival. She had a bigger plan. Whatever she was hiding, it was dangerous enough to make her enemies. Risk storming this ship in the middle of deep space, and now he was tangled in it too. The sound of boots came again, this time from above them, echoing through the vents. They were getting closer. Leora moved toward the hatch, ready to push. It opened. She glanced back at Ethan, her voice barely a whisper. Whatever happens next, don't hesitate. Then she kicked the hatch open, and they dropped into the chaos below. Asterisk. The moment Ethan and Leora dropped from the hatch, they landed in a dim cargo hold filled with towering crates and tangled cables. The air smelled of fuel and scorched metal, and the faint hum of the ship's engines vibrated under their feet. Somewhere above, heavy boots thudded against the floor as mercenaries spread out, their voices barking orders. Ethan crouched low, keeping behind a stack of containers while Leora scanned the room with sharp, alert eyes. She moved like someone who had been hunted before, every step measured, every glance searching for danger. At the far end of the cargo hold, a set of large metal doors stood half open. Beyond them, Ethan caught sight of a long hallway that curved downward toward the docking bay. His pulse quickened. If they could make it there, maybe they could launch an escape pod before the mercenaries closed in. But Leora didn't move toward the doors immediately. Instead, she pointed to a glowing control terminal near the wall. They've locked the bay, she whispered. We'll need to override it from here. Ethan knelt beside the terminal, pulling his wrist device into sync. Lines of alien code flickered across the small screen. It wasn't like the locks he'd hacked before. This was layered security, reinforced with military encryption. He glanced at Leora. This will take time. Her golden eyes narrowed. Then I'll buy it for you. She stepped away, moving silently through the shadows. Ethan could hear faint footsteps and metallic clicks from the other side of the crates. Leora's glow dimmed as she pressed herself into the darkness, disappearing from sight. A shout rang out. Movement. Over. There. Plasma fire erupted, blue bolts slicing through the air. Ethan flinched but kept his focus on the terminal, forcing the code to unravel. The screen flashed a warning. Security override detected, and the progress bar slowed. Leora's voice echoed through the cargo hold, sharp and commanding. You'll have to do better than that. There was a burst of golden light, bright enough to cast her shadow against the far wall. The mercenary shouted, some stumbling back in confusion. Ethan risked a glance and saw her move with inhuman speed. Weaving between shots, her hands crackling with energy every time she struck. The air rippled like heat waves, but for every enemy she dropped, more poured into the hold. The terminal beeped, 50%. Ethan's hands flew over the interface, rerouting power and cutting through firewalls. Sweat dripped down his face as the sound of battle grew closer. A plasma bolt hit the crate beside him, burning a smoking hole into its side. He ducked lower, biting his lip to keep steady. Liara shouted from across the hold, "Faster, Ethan." 70%. He could hear her breathing hard now, the blasts of light from her hands growing weaker. The mercenaries had begun to adapt, moving in tighter formations. One of them fired a net launcher. A web of glowing blue energy wrapped around her arm. She tore it free, but the delay let another soldier close in, slamming her against the wall. Ethan's progress bar hit 90%. The soldier raised his weapon to strike, but Ethan overrode the nearest cargo crane. The massive claw swung down from the ceiling, smashing into the mercenary and knocking him aside. 100%. The terminal beeped and the docking bay doors began to unlock. A deep metallic groan filled the air as the massive gates slowly slid open. Liara sprinted toward him, her hair glowing brightly again. "Move!" she yelled, grabbing his arm and pulling him through the now open corridor. They ran down the curved hallway, the sound of alarms following them like a shadow. Behind them, the mercenaries gave chase, their boots pounding against the metal floor. The docking bay stretched out before them, a vast open space lined with ships and small escape pods. Bright lights illuminated the sleek curves of the craft, but only 2 pods still seemed operational. Liara dragged Ethan toward the nearest one. Just as they reached it, a sharp hiss echoed through the air and a heavy blast door slammed down. Blocking their path, Ethan skidded to a stop. "No. No, no, no." Liara's gaze darted to the control panel beside the door. "It's been sealed from the bridge," she said quickly. "They're locking us in." Ethan stepped toward the panel, but Liara caught his hand. "They'll expect you to try to open it," she said. "They're probably already aiming at this spot." As if on cue, a plasma bolt hit the panel, exploding in a shower of sparks. From the shadows above, mercenaries began dropping into the docking bay, ropes hissing as they slid down. Ethan backed up, his mind spinning for another plan. Liara's glow flared again, and she whispered, "We're not trapped yet." She led him toward a maintenance lift on the side of the bay. The lift shook as it descended into the lower decks. The noise of the battle above faded, but the tension in the air didn't. Ethan looked at her, breathing hard. "Do you actually have a plan?" he asked. Her golden eyes met his, unblinking. "Yes," she said softly. "But you're not going to like it." Asterisk. The maintenance lift rattled as it descended, carrying Ethan and Liara deeper into the underbelly of the alien ship. The walls were narrow here, lined with old pipes and flickering service lights. The air was thick with the smell of burnt metal, and the sound of distant gunfire echoed faintly above. Liara kept her eyes forward, her glowing veins dimmer now, like a candle running low on fuel. Ethan wanted to ask what her plan was, but the tightness in her jaw told him she was focused on something else. Halfway down, the lift screeched to a stop. A sharp click echoed in the space, and then a voice filled the air. "Deep and controlled, human," it said, smooth like cold metal. "You've made quite the mess." Ethan's eyes darted around. The voice was coming from the lift's comm system. "Who are you?" he demanded. The voice chuckled softly. "I am Commander Varric, the one in charge of retrieving our asset." Liara's hands clenched into fists. "I'm not your asset," she said sharply. Varric ignored her and continued speaking to Ethan. "You're in a position most would envy, human," the commander said. You have something I want, and I have the power to decide whether you live or die. Ethan's brow furrowed. I'm guessing you're not offering tea and friendship, he muttered. Varric's tone remained calm. I am offering you a way out. Hand over the girl. Step into the escape pod we'll provide, and I'll let you go. Unharmed, Leora turned to Ethan, her eyes wide but steady. He's lying, she said quickly. If you give me to them, you'll never leave this ship. Alive, Varric's voice deepened. She will say anything to keep you on her side, human. But she is dangerous, unpredictable, and far more valuable to us than you could imagine. Ethan's pulse quickened. He didn't trust the commander, but he also didn't fully understand what Liara truly was. What happens if you get her? Ethan asked carefully. Varric paused. Before answering, we will use her abilities to end a plague that threatens billions. But the cure will belong to us alone. Ethan caught the subtle truth in that. Not a cure for everyone. Just for those the commander chose, Liara stepped closer, her voice low and urgent. Ethan, if they take me, they'll use my DNA to make soldiers who can't be killed. They'll burn entire worlds to get what they want. The lift shuddered slightly as Varric spoke again. You have one chance, human. Take the deal and live. Refuse, and you die alongside her. Ethan's thoughts spun in circles. He could almost picture the escape pod, the cold quiet of being free from this chaos. But then he saw flashes of what Varric had described, an army with Liara's power. Marching across the galaxy, leaving nothing but ash, he clenched his jaw, his choice becoming clearer. You're wasting your breath, he said to Varric. I'm not handing her over. For the first time, the commander's tone shifted, a faint edge of anger breaking through. Very well, human. You've made your choice and sealed your fate. The cum went silent, and the lift jolted violently. Ethan grabbed the railing to keep from falling. Liara steadied herself and looked at him with something almost like gratitude. You don't know what that just cost you, she said softly. Ethan gave a half smile. Yeah, but I think I'd hate myself if I chose the other option. The lift finally reached the lower deck, opening into a long corridor lit by faint green lights. The walls here were damp, with thin streams of water running down from unseen cracks. Above, Ethan stepped out cautiously, scanning for movement. Somewhere in the distance, the hum of machinery echoed. Liara touched his arm and nodded toward the end of the hall. That way. There's a power relay we can overload. It will disable their tracking systems. They moved quickly, their footsteps echoing on the wet metal floor. The corridor twisted sharply, and as they turned the corner, Ethan froze, standing in the file. Middle of the hall were 3 mercenaries, their armor darker than the rest, marked with jagged crimson stripes. One of them spoke, his voice distorted through the helmet. Commander Varric sends his regards. Before Ethan could react, the mercenaries opened fire. Plasma bolts lit up the corridor, the air sizzling with each shot. Ethan dove behind a pipe column while Liara raised her hands, sending a wave of golden energy down the hall. The blast knocked one mercenary off his feet, but the others pushed forward, their armor shielding them from most of the impact. Ethan's eyes locked on an overhead vent grate. If they could get up there, they might bypass the fight entirely. Liara, he shouted, pointing to the vent. She nodded, blasting another mercenary back before grabbing Ethan's arm. With surprising strength, she boosted him upward. Ethan pulled himself into the vent, the metal groaning under his weight. He reached down to help her up just as a plasma shot grazed her shoulder. She winced but climbed in beside him. The last thing Ethan heard before they crawled away was the voice of one of the mercenaries shouting into a cum. They're heading for the relay. Cut them off now. Asterisk. The narrow vent shook as the ship groaned under the weight of distant explosions. Ethan crawled quickly, his palms scraping against the cold metal. Liara followed close behind, her glowing veins dim but steady. Every sound echoed inside the vent, their breathing, the distant clanging of boots below. the muffled voices of mercenaries coordinating their hunt. Ethan could feel the tension building with each meter they moved. If they didn't reach the relay soon, Varick's forces would lock the ship down completely. The vent opened into a small service bay filled with humming generators. Dim orange lights cast long shadows across the walls. The air was warmer here, heavy with the smell of heated metal and old oil. Leora dropped down first, scanning the room quickly before signaling Ethan to follow. "This way," she whispered, moving toward a reinforced door at the far end. Beyond it lay the ship's control center, the only place where they could disable the tracking systems and give themselves a chance to escape. But as they reached the door, a harsh alarm blared, red lights flashed above their heads, and the reinforced panels slid shut, sealing them inside the service bay. From a hidden speaker, Varick's voice filled the room, cold and mocking. "You've run far enough, human. And as for you, Subject 7, this ends now." Ethan's jaw tightened. He spun around, looking for another way out, but then the wall behind them hissed open. Armored mercenaries stepped inside, their weapons raised, at least a dozen, far more than Ethan had ever hoped to fight. Leora stepped in front of him, her voice calm but fierce. "Stay behind me." Her golden veins brightened, casting a soft glow across the room. The nearest mercenary fired, but the shot seemed to bend away, striking the wall instead. Leora raised both hands, sending out a shockwave of energy that rattled the entire bay. Half the soldiers stumbled, but the others pressed forward, firing in controlled bursts. Ethan ducked behind a generator, trying to think of a plan. Every blast from Leora pushed them back, but he could see the strain on her face. Her power wasn't limitless, and they both knew it. Varick's voice cut through the chaos again. "You can't win, girl. You can't protect the human forever." Ethan gritted his teeth and shouted back, "Yeah? Then you'd better be ready to prove it." He dashed toward a side panel on the wall, hoping to overload the generators. If he could cause a power surge, maybe it would take out the mercenaries' weapons. Leora bought him seconds by unleashing another wave of golden light, knocking two soldiers into the far wall, but more poured in through the opening, relentless. Ethan ripped open the side panel and began pulling wires, sparks bursting against his hands. The room lights flickered, the hum of the generators rising into a deep growl. One mercenary saw him and charged. Before the soldier could fire, Leora intercepted, slamming her glowing palm against his chest. A burst of light sent him crashing into the wall. "Ethan!" she called, "Now!" He crossed the last wires, and the generators screamed. A massive arc of electricity surged through the room. The mercenaries' rifles sparked and died, some even exploding in their hands. The sudden silence was broken only by their grunts of frustration. Leora didn't waste the moment. She swept her hands forward, sending one last pulse of energy that hurled the remaining soldiers back through the door. The reinforced panels slammed shut behind them, locking the intruders out. Ethan dropped to one knee, breathing hard. His hands tingled from the shock. But he was alive. Leora knelt beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "We don't have long," she said. "The control center is just ahead, and once we're there, I can end this." He looked into her eyes, searching for certainty. "End it how?" he asked. Her gaze hardened. "By taking control of the ship and turning its weapons on Varick's fleet." They moved quickly to the next door, forcing it open and stepping into the control center. The room was vast, lined with alien consoles that pulsed with shifting colors. In the center stood a massive holographic display of the ship and the surrounding space. Several smaller ships floated nearby. Varick's forces. Leora stepped to the main console and pressed her hands against it. The golden veins in her skin lit up brighter than ever. The alien system seemed to respond instantly, their colors shifting to match her glow. Ethan watched in awe as lines of alien code streamed across the screens. Outside the holographic display, Varick's fleet began to shift formation. "They're preparing to fire," Leora said, her voice steady. Ethan tightened his fists. Then, hit them first. She closed her eyes, and the ship's massive forward cannons came online with a deep, vibrating hum. The energy built into the room itself seemed to shake. Outside, streaks of blinding light tore through the darkness of space. Varric's lead ship took the full blast, its hull cracking apart in a violent explosion. But before they could celebrate, alarms screamed again. The surviving enemy ships launched boarding pods toward the control center. Liara opened her eyes, her glow dimming slightly. "This isn't over yet," she said. Ethan glanced at the door, his heart pounding. "Then we make our stand here," he replied. And as the first impact shook the room, they prepared to face the fight of their lives. The control center shook violently as the first boarding pods slammed into the ship's hull. Dust and sparks rained from the ceiling, and the holographic display flickered with static. Ethan gripped the edge of the main console to steady himself. Liara staggered but kept her hands on the glowing controls, her golden veins dimming under the strain. "They're coming," she said quietly. "And this time, they won't stop until one of us is dead." The doors rattled as something heavy pounded against them from the outside. Each impact echoed like a war drum. Ethan glanced at the console beside him, a small panel showing the ship's remaining weapons. "Half were already offline. We can't hold them here forever," he said. Liara didn't look up. "We don't need forever. Just long enough for me to finish this." Her voice was calm, but there was something in her tone that made Ethan uneasy. "What are you talking about?" he asked. She finally met his gaze, her golden eyes glowing faintly. "If I release all of my DNA into the ship's systems, I can broadcast the cure for the Red Plague across the galaxy," she explained. "But doing that will burn me out completely. I won't survive it." The pounding at the doors grew louder. Metal screeched as the locks began to bend. Ethan's chest tightened. "There has to be another way," he said quickly. Liara shook her head, her voice firm. "There isn't. If Varric takes me, he'll weaponize what I am. If I give it freely, no one can control it." The door cracked open slightly, a beam of blue plasma slicing through the air. Ethan raised his wrist device, firing a short burst of electrical energy. That forced the intruders back for a moment, but he knew it was only a delay. Varric's voice echoed through the comms, low and mocking. "Human, you can still save yourself. Hand her over, and I'll let you walk away." Ethan looked at Liara. Her expression was steady, but her hands trembled against the console. He thought of all the moments since he'd met her, the desperation in her voice when she begged him to open the door, the power she'd used to protect him, the trust she'd placed in him without reason. And now she was asking him to let her die for something bigger than both of them. The door finally burst open. Mercenaries poured in, their rifles glowing. Ethan moved instinctively, putting himself between them and Liara. Shots tore through the room, burning holes into the walls and consoles. Ethan fired back with his wrist device, but there were too many. One of the soldiers shouted, "Take the girl alive." Another replied, "Kill the human if he resists." Liara's glow flared suddenly, her voice carrying across the chaos. "Ethan, now!" He turned and saw her leaning against the main console, her veins blazing like molten gold. The ship's systems surged with power, lights blindingly bright. A deep hum filled the air as the transmission began. Ethan realized she had already started the process. She was giving everything. Right now the mercenaries charged, but the ship itself seemed to react to Liara's will. Panels exploded, sending arcs of electricity into their armor. Some fell instantly. Others stumbled back in shock. Varric's voice shouted through the comms, furious now. "Stop her! Stop her!" Ethan rushed to her side. Her breathing was ragged, her glow flickering. He placed a hand on her shoulder. "You're not doing this alone." She gave a faint smile. "You already did your part. You kept me free long enough to choose." The last of the code streamed across the console. The ship's comms blared. "Transmission complete." Cure dispersed. Liara's glow faded almost instantly. Her legs gave out. And Ethan caught her before she hit the floor. Her skin was cold. Now her breathing shallow, she looked up at him weakly, her lips moving in barely a whisper. Please. Open the door, human. Ethan's throat tightened. You already did, he said softly, behind them. The mercenaries fell back, confusion spreading as Varroc's voice vanished from the coms outside. The holographic display showed enemy ships breaking formation. Some retreating entirely. The battle was over, but it didn't feel like victory. Ethan carried Liara to the nearest escape pod, his steps heavy. He placed her gently inside, connecting her to the pod's life support systems. Her eyes fluttered. Open for a brief moment. Where are we going? She asked faintly. Somewhere safe, he replied, though he wasn't sure such a place existed anymore. The pod's hatch sealed, and the launch sequence began. As they drifted away from the crippled alien ship, Ethan looked back at the wreckage. He didn't know if Liara would survive the journey, but he knew one thing. Whatever happened next, her choice had changed the galaxy forever. And somewhere in the quiet hum of the escape pod, he thought he heard her voice again, soft, almost. A whisper, please. Open the door, human.